Hi everybody, and welcome to Blenheim Palace. As an American, I am so excited to be here because I have a huge interest in those American heiresses that came over during that period called the Gilded Age, roughly around 1870 and up to 1910. That's when over 100 American heiresses married into the British aristocracy, and of those 100, 60 married firstborn sons. One of those 60 was Consuelo Vanderbilt. She was born in New York in 1877 and married the 9th Duke of Marlborough in 1895. That's right, she was still a teenager. She had to say goodbye to her home country, to her family, and marry the 9th Duke, somebody she hardly knew. When she arrived here, can you imagine what she thought? It's vast. And this palace during that period didn't have all those modern amenities. But what Consuelo did with her wealth and her inheritance, she's one of the reasons that Blenheim survives today. And that's what I want to find out. I want to find out what it was actually like for Consuelo to live here, but also to find out what she did to preserve this palace for future generations. So let's head inside. When I married into the British aristocracy, it was the start of a wonderfully exciting journey. But it was also a little daunting. I became a Viscountess, and for an American girl from a small town outside Chicago, that was quite a shock.
I live with my husband Luke, heir to the Earl of Sandwich, and our family at Mapperton House in Dorset.
Living in a place like this is a joy, but also a challenge. And every day we're aware that we're preserving a very special part of Britain's heritage. Mapperton has opened up an extraordinary new world for me, and I can't wait to share it with you all.
So if you love castles and manors and stately homes as much as I do, please join this American Viscountess as I journey into the British countryside in search of some of Britain's finest historic houses.
I mean, there really aren't any words to describe how magnificent Blenheim Palace is. I mean, just walking up those steps and entering through these extraordinary grand doors and then arriving right here. I cannot imagine what Consuelo must have been feeling when she first arrived as the new Duchess of Marlborough. And, you know, it's just this, wow, it's magnificent. Oh my gosh, this is my new home.
Blenheim Palace was built at the command of Queen Anne to honor the first Duke of Marlborough following his victory at the Battle of Blenheim in 1704. The magnificent scale and grandeur of Blenheim reflected the gratitude of Queen and country. It was the vision of the architect Sir John Vanbrugh and a shining example of the English Baroque style. Blenheim Palace has been home to the Dukes of Marlborough for over 300 years.
Visitors come to Blenheim Palace year in and year out, thousands of them because of the rich history and the architecture, but also many, and especially Americans, come to see the portraits of Consuelo Vanderbilt, the 9th Duchess of Marlborough. This was painted by Ambrose McAvoy, and he was really considered the society painter in the early 20th century. Painting Consuelo really helped to elevate his status, and having him as a painter of the aristocrats. And in particular, I will mention that my husband's great-grandmother, Alberta Sturges, the 9th Countess of Sandwich, used McAvoy as well in around 1918 to paint not only 2 portraits of herself, but also of her children. So it's just wonderful for me to see this beautiful McAvoy painting with lovely, gorgeous, long neck, Consuelo Vanderbilt here. And I can't wait to explore, gosh, so many more portraits at Blenheim.
I'm currently researching and archiving the unique collection of letters and journals which Alberta, the 9th Countess of Sandwich, left us in the Montagu family archives. Alberta's splendid portrait by Ambrose McAvoy hangs in the staircase hall at Mapperton. Alberta became friends with McAvoy and his wife Mary, and there are a number of letters which reference their friendship and progress of his work. McAvoy writes, "Dear Lady Sandwich, I have been meaning to write every day since I left Hinchingbrooke to thank you for your kindness during my last visit." He continues, "I have been feeling so happy about this portrait. I really feel it is a great success from my point of view, and I can never thank you enough for all this help you have given me in painting it." In another letter, McAvoy mentions the portrait he is painting of the Duchess of Marlborough. He writes, "I have finished this picture of the Duchess of Marlborough that you saw, and also done another one, just ahead, that I am very anxious for you to see." Stunning portraits of Consuelo are all around at Blenheim. I met up with social history researcher Antonia Keeney to hear more about Consuelo's time at the palace.
Thank you so much, Antonia, for meeting me. And it's just absolutely wonderful to be here at Blenheim and also to learn more about Consuelo's time here, because it wasn't that long that she was here, because the marriage, if I'm right, only lasted just over a decade.
I mean, she was barely here at all if you look at the great scheme of things.
Right.
And in fact, there she is. And that painting was painted as their marriage was really beginning to crumble.
Really?
And I think it's such a sad story, because she almost came here against her will.
Yes.
She didn't agree to be married to start with, and then her mother, took herself off with a fit of the vapours and goodness knows what else. And it was her mother that wanted her to have the title.
And, that was very common for these ambitious mothers who, had this, they had a great life back in New York or back in the States, but yet they wanted something more for their daughters, to have these titles or to be a part of the British aristocracy. And it was during that sort of period, the same period that Consuelo came over, that was called sort of the Gilded Age, and those dollar princesses. And you're right, she was so young.
She was.
And she absolutely didn't want this marriage.
No. And she describes her wedding morning and how, she spent the morning in tears, and they had to try and disguise that her eyes were red and puffy from crying. And, to come to somewhere that was a typical Victorian country estate with all the protocols and the formality must have been such a shock for her.
Well, because she's 18 when she's married.
Yes.
And then arrives here, though, 6 months after the wedding, approximately.
Yeah.
Is that right? And then
the
first time, I know that she had been at Blenheim beforehand, but this is the first time coming here as the Duchess.
Exactly. And it's very different when you're the one that has to, for example, in late 1896, the Prince of Wales, who later became Edward VII, was a house guest. And, she had to think about how everyone had to be seated according to their rank. And, there was all this protocol that had to be observed. She was a young girl.
Yes.
She should have been out partying and having a good time.
Exactly.
It must have been so difficult.
It must have been really difficult. And then she did, of course, produce 2 boys.
She did.
So,
I think she coined the phrase "an heir and a spare."
Did she really?
I think she did.
Oh my goodness, how extraordinary. So this painting though, Antonia, who was this done by and approximately what year?
Okay, so it's by John Singer Sargent, again an American.
An American?
Yes, absolutely. And I think it was done in about 1905, and that's just when their marriage was really drifting apart and they separated shortly afterwards.
So do you kind of look at this portrait and think it was somewhat staged, as if we have to get this done because this is what, we as sort of high society aristocrats, we need to get these portraits done by, a very, very well-known famous painter. But then after that, it's the end of the marriage.
Well, and also the Duke wanted it to hang opposite this immense painting by Joshua Reynolds. And it was staged in every sense of the word, the Singer Sargent, because this was painted in his studio.
Oh,
and
was it?
It was, and Consuelo actually had to stand, or he stood her on a box, and then painted in a step, which doesn't actually exist in the Great Hall, and this is meant to represent the Great Hall.
Oh my goodness.
Because the Duke was not nearly as tall as Consuelo. She was very tall, slender, elegant.
Yes, and he's a lot shorter. How extraordinary. What was her life like here for those 11 years? What would you describe it as?
Well, I think she was obviously a doer. And
Right.
so I know she was very well regarded in the larger community. We have a record of her providing a treat for local school children every year. And there were about 800 children out on the South Lawn with roundabouts and swings and coconuts and, races and all sorts of things. She used to, when the 7th Duke and Duchess were here, so he died in 1883, they used to collect any leftover food and again distribute it locally.
Right.
And it was all sent out together in one great big pan, one great big container. And she thought, well, at least I could separate the first course from the dessert, etc.
Yes.
And, she was clearly very thoughtful and very considerate. And even when she left Blenheim, after her time, she got involved in all sorts of welfare activities for the wives of prisoners.
Right.
So she was an incredibly caring woman.
As this was, in one sense, a business contract, an arranged marriage, she came really into this family in order to help preserve and save Blenheim. And the Duke knew that, didn't he?
He had instructions that he had to bring money to Blenheim.
Right.
And the only way he could do that was by marrying.
Right.
And my goodness, he did it.
Yeah. But she did come here with ambitions to make sure that this place was preserved. She did throw, if you like, her millions into it. Yeah. And do you think that that's because she knew that she had also produced the heir, that her son was going to have to take on this great estate? So there was meaning behind her intentions to make sure that her money was spent in the right ways here at Blenheim.
Yeah, but at that stage, she didn't know she was going to have a son.
Right.
Or didn't know she was able to have children.
Of course.
But yes, of course. This is something that each generation holds and looks after. And in fact, she did visit Blenheim after the Duke had died, and she did used to come and visit her son.
Right.
So yes, that's a very fair point. And she's buried here. She's just near Winston Churchill, in fact.
Oh my goodness.
So at Blaydon.
Right.
She died in New York, but she was brought back over here, so she's with her son.
So she's with her son.
Yeah.
Well, that's wonderful. Yeah. And just one last thing, Antonia, because I do look at this picture, and in one sense, it kind of haunts me. Yeah. Because, if you walked into the Red Drawing Room, and as somebody who's just, wanting to know a little bit about Consuelo, when you look at that portrait, for me, in one sense, it doesn't seem as an unhappy portrait. You would never have known that the year later the marriage was over. It seems to me that it was almost like, right, we're going to look the part, dress the part, and get this portrait done.
But then contrast it with that, which is also we're going to look the part, but there's so much joy in that.
Yes.
There's no joy in that,
yes.
or very little joy in that, I think.
It's very much a staged. Well, Ivor, her youngest son, looks... he looks quite happy with his
his Blenheim Spaniel and
his Blenheim Spaniels, yes. Well, how wonderful just to be able to see this absolutely stunning portrait of the family and you know, done by an American artist. Absolutely brilliant. Well, thank you, Antonia. Fantastic.
Pleasure.
Sadly, few records remain in the archives of Consuelo's time at Blenheim.
Hello, welcome to the archives.
Thank you so much for having me.
Dr. Alexa Frost has selected some treasures to show me that have survived.
I'm so excited to be here. I'm almost trembling because I'm in the archives at Blenheim and seeing some of what Consuelo left and a little bit about her life here.
Yeah.
So thank you.
Oh, thank you.
You know, and I've read a lot about Consuelo because, of course, she wrote her own book, The Glitter and the Gold, and I was really able to get, I think, a bigger picture about her time here as well. But looking now and seeing that date in front of me, 1896, am I right in saying, of course, we know that she married 1895,
yes,
but she didn't come to Blenheim, is that right, until 1896?
That's when she returned as the first time as the Duchess of Marlborough.
And she wrote so clearly how it was, you know, she arrived and it was almost as if she was this what we would classify as a modern day celebrity. She arrived at the train station, the red carpet was rolled out, the whole community of Woodstock was there.
Yeah, and there were children, were given the day off school. They were lined up with flowers for her. There were speeches at the town hall. All eyes were on her. And as you say, it was a big celebrity style wedding. And whilst it was written about extensively in the papers, both in America and in England, here you've got the local people all coming together and celebrating and welcoming her to Blenheim.
You've pulled out some things from the archives here. Where do you want to start?
So let's go for the homecoming.
Okay. Yeah. So March 31st is the homecoming.
Yes.
Amazing.
Yes, so this was put together by the photographer Henry Tort.
Okay. Wow.
And
oh my goodness. The homecoming of their graces, the Duke and Duchess of Marlborough.
Photographs by Henry W. Taunt there.
A thorough, hearty English welcome home. So they were married 1895. They went on sort of, as they did, sort of this extensive honeymoon, sort of traveling the world. Yeah. And then she arrives for the first time as the Duchess.
It's overwhelming.
Yes.
Let's have a look.
Okay.
So at the entry to the town, we had an archway with floral decorations. There were flags up in the town centre.
Lovely photos. And look at that. I spotted this. Do you see what I'm looking at?
Yeah.
That is amazing to see those American flags. So they were really welcoming her.
Yeah.
Fantastic.
Yeah. And as you can see, there were processions from the fire brigades. There were people lining the footpaths all the way up to
American flag again. Have to point that out. American flag. I love it. So they're heading up. Is that right?
Yeah.
The procession. Yes.
Yeah. And you've got the staff waiting outside, all in their finest livery, and Consuelo is ready at this stage with the Duke to just go in and nice quiet time, get settled in at home, but they have an elaborate dinner for the tenants in the palace.
Oh my goodness. Fantastic photos.
There you go.
And then
here we have a close-up of Consuelo. This is sitting in the carriage where you can see that it will be drawn by men and not horses. This is outside the town hall when the mayor and his grace are giving their speeches.
Is beautiful. I mean, we say that over again, but she is just stunning.
Consuelo's hefty dowry, in many ways, saved Blenheim, which, like so many historic houses then and now, need constant upkeep and repair.
Looking at Consuelo in particular, the millions that she brought was able to secure Blenheim for future generations. Is that right?
Yeah. I think that's a very reasonable thing to say. There was socially ambitious mothers from America. There was also His Grace's family desperate to secure Blenheim for the future,
yes,
for the family, and to have what we have now, for people to be able to come and
yes,
view the palace,
yeah,
with the roof intact and a lake dredged. And
speaking about the lake dredged, because some of the projects that Consuelo decided to embark on, obviously using her money, one of them was dredging the lake. Is that right?
Well, the Ninth Duke is reported to have written back to his land agent at Blenheim the day after the engagement, telling him to dredge the lake. He was confident in their marriage to be that that work was going to start happening.
Oh my goodness! So
that was before their homecoming, before their marriage.
The Ninth Duke is on the phone saying, "Right, I've got the funds.
Yeah,
let's get to work." How wonderful! Consuelo was the reason I wanted to come here, just to see what she had, in one sense, put her mark on here at Blenheim in order to help preserve it for future generations. But again, she wasn't the only American who married the Ninth Duke of Marlborough. There was Gladys, is that right?
That's correct, yeah.
So their marriage ends, Consuelo and the Duke, their marriage ends. But is it right that Gladys was a friend of Consuelo's?
That's in part right. Gladys and Consuelo became friends following her introduction to the Ninth Duke of Marlborough.
Okay.
In the early 1900s, they were close friends. We do actually have some letters that they wrote, that Consuelo wrote to Gladys, which
so you do have.
I can,
okay.
I can share.
So how extraordinary that they were friends.
So we've got a letter dated here from October 1901 where Consuelo writes to Gladys, who is in Paris at the time. And Consuelo is at Blenheim and thanks her for sending the children such lovely toys.
Oh, yes.
How can I thank you sufficiently for your kindness thoughts in sending children such lovely toys?
And then it says he was playing with it the whole evening.
Yeah. And then over here, she talks about how delightful it was, and Blanford and Ivor send you kisses and many thanks.
Oh my goodness. So there is this overlap, if you like, of while Consuelo was still married to the Duke, and an affair, in one sense, happening between the Duke and Gladys, but that's towards the end of their 11-year, marriage as we know it.
Yeah.
And so my understanding, I think, is that it took a long time for that sort of divorce and then annulment to happen. But after it happened, is that right? Both of them immediately married.
Within 2 months, both of them had remarried. Wow. The Ninth Duke to Gladys and Consuelo to Jacques Balsan.
Oh my goodness. Well, thanks so much, Alexa. This has been a real treat and honor. Thank you so much.
It's been a pleasure. Thank you.
Today, Blenheim Palace is a UNESCO World Heritage Site, welcoming some 800,000 visitors each year. But it is also the family home of the Dukes of Marlborough and the Spencer Churchill family.
Good morning.
Hello. I'm Julie, and I have a meeting with Lady Henrietta.
Okay, please follow me.
Great.
Welcome to Blenheim Palace.
Thank you.
In the private family apartments, I met with Lady Henrietta Spencer Churchill, who is Consuelo's great-granddaughter.
Lovely to see you.
Hi, so nice to see you.
And you. Been a while.
I know, it's been a while. Anyway, thank you so much for having me here at Blenheim, and what an honor just to be here. And now in the private apartments, and now I get to pick your brain.
Perfect. Let's sit down and have a chat.
Okay, brilliant. Absolutely brilliant. It's so wonderful to be here, and these
Have
are
you
the
been in this room before?
No, it's beautiful, but also I feel slightly special because I'm in the private apartments.
Exactly,
Is that right?
Exactly. And actually, people are always very intimidated by the size of Blenheim, but when you come in here in the private apartments, you can see how lived in and cozy it is.
Yes, exactly. It is. It's very. I can feel as it's very homely, and it's been lots of family pictures around.
And this is actually called the Duchess's sitting room. Typically, every generation, this is where the Duchess hang out. It was her sitting room. So she would sit at the desk and write letters.
Right.
Whereas the men had their sort of more masculine study at the end of the corridor.
Right. But it's wonderful because it does feel, as you said, very cozy. And mentioning, of course, the Duchess's sitting room, I do, as the American, want to ask you, a few questions about Consuelo.
Funnily enough, I've just come back from Newport, Rhode Island, where all the cottages are,
Yes.
So I was at Marble House. So to relive, where my great ancestor lived in these amazing houses. And the first night we had dinner in Marble House, so it was quite nostalgic for me to be there.
Of course it would be. And let's start with Marble House then, because if I'm right in saying that Marble House was where the 9th Duke proposed to Consuelo.
Yeah, that was absolutely. So very much, as we know, persuaded by the strong Alva.
Yes.
Her mother from Alabama in the South.
It's extraordinary.
And of course, Consuelo was in love with another man.
Yes.
Rutherford at the time.
And engaged, is that right?
Well,
secret engagement?
Probably, certainly the mother didn't know about it.
Right, yes.
And then, she was virtually locked up, so she couldn't escape. So it was all rather tragic in a sense, but, the engagement took place. To be honest, my great-grandfather, Sonny, the 9th Duke, his mission was to save Blenheim. And thankfully he did.
Yes.
And Alva's mission was to marry off her daughter to a rich aristocrat, not necessarily British, because I think they went down the French route for a while.
Yes, as many of the American heiresses did.
Exactly. But anyway, I think at the end of the day, it wasn't a happy marriage, but it turned out fantastically well for everybody. So,
yeah. No, absolutely. And so Consuelo technically arrives to the palace in 1896, married in 1895, and in New York.
Yeah.
And she is, though, beautiful. When we look at these American heiresses, you have very socially ambitious mothers for most of them. We know that Alva was like that, as you said, from Alabama, but then gets caught up in the New York society, very socially ambitious. But she has this stunning, beautiful daughter who, but I don't think Consuelo actually thought of herself as beautiful. Is that right?
Well, she was still very young, don't forget.
Yes.
She was barely 18. But I think one advantage she had was she wasn't coming from, some small little town in the South. She'd been brought up in the likes of Marble House and the Breakers, so she was used to entertaining on a grand scale, so she knew what it involved.
Right.
So she knew how tables should be laid and, guest etiquette and stuff. Although I have to say, I think it was quite tricky initially because there's some quite strong women in our family. It seems to be the women who are the strong ones. And I think she was confronted by cousins and aunts and things of Sonny's.
Right.
Who were basically thinking, who's this little American upstart coming and telling us, what to do? But she soon got the measure of them. And I think at the end of the day, everybody loved her and respected her enormously.
Yes. Consuelo is your great-grandmother. And what you've been able to learn about her, and you did meet her, is that right?
Yes. I mean, I have a very blurred image of her. I remember she came to the house we used to live in before my father moved into Blenheim, which is Lee Place, 5 miles away. And I remember her coming there and sitting in actually a little sitting room there. And she came for tea. I don't know, maybe she was staying, I can't remember, but I do remember her in this she had the most wonderful posture, elegant lady with her hair back in a bun and just sitting. And even at that age, I was thinking, gosh, you're such an elegant lady.
Yes. Do you feel that she did bring, I'm going to say this, but this sort of American spirit to her that maybe hadn't been seen before because she was coming into the unknown?
Yeah. I think she was confident in a certain way and very shy in another way. But I think she was well educated, which was an asset. So a lot of the English men in particular found her very stimulating company to sit next to, because she had things to talk about. She had her own views, whether it was to do with politics or history or whatever, which perhaps a lot of English women at that stage and that age didn't. So she was always very well liked by, I think, the aristocracy, shall we say.
Right.
But I think life in the country was a little bit different. She was used to having ensuite bathrooms and running hot water. And it was okay, we had running hot water. So it was a little bit of a shock to the system.
Right.
But she embraced it.
Yes.
She took her lot and got on with it.
Of course, she brought in her millions. And in one sense, that did help to preserve Blenheim.
Most definitely. I mean, I always say if it wasn't for Consuelo, we probably still wouldn't be here. But having said that, we shouldn't take credit away from Sonny, because he spent that money very wisely.
Right.
He invested in making things better, not only on infrastructure you don't necessarily see, whether it was, putting in heating, more bathrooms, etc., but also the wonderful gardens he created.
And is it wonderful for you, being the great-granddaughter of, Consuelo, so well-known and so really well-respected by the community here, but also I think she was very much well-liked, wasn't she?
Oh, very much so.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah.
And so you have, of course, you've got,
I've got a bit of American
what are
blood.
you? What are you? A quarter. A quarter of American. But it must be.
But I've always loved America. I've always spent a huge amount of time there for my business anyway.
Yes.
So I feel very comfortable there.
Yes.
But it's particularly lovely going to somewhere like Newport and just soaking up that history.
Yes.
And imagining what it might have been like when they were living there.
Being able to talk to you right now and again, listening to your memories, it's this, again, conversation I always think is for future generations as well.
Well, I know. It makes the history come alive.
It does.
Yeah.
It does.
Yeah.
So, and in the same room that Consuelo definitely, presumably, spent quite a bit of time in her 11-year marriage here.
Definitely.
On display in the corner of the Duchess's sitting room is another glorious portrait of Consuelo by Ambrose McAvoy. And Henrietta showed me one of her favorite paintings of her great-grandmother.
So it's quite a wonderful focal point when you come down that long corridor.
Yes.
And it's sort of something that makes you want to walk down that corridor to see what's at the end of it.
Look at. So tell me just a little.
That's by Veruda.
Okay.
Obviously that was painted here. So you can see the tapestry in the background.
Yes.
It was one of the formal portraits painted, probably asked for by her mother, I would imagine. So she must be in her early 20s.
Yes.
But it's rather wonderful because I like the fluidity of it, but I also like the fact that there's some architectural detail, but in a loose way.
Yes, and I always, when we see portraits, I always look to see the props that are used. And it's so interesting that she has sort of a rose and a book of some sort. And then possibly
a handkerchief.
Or
gloves, yeah.
Yes.
Handkerchiefs or gloves, I'm not quite sure. So it's as though she's just been in the garden, picked a rose. And
also the hat, just because a lot of times, when you look at portraits, not so many times do you see sort of such an extravagant hat, but I guess it's the time.
I guess it's because she'd been outside and come back in.
Yes.
And so still have the hat on.
So almost as if it's a wonderful.
Very elegant.
It's very elegant, absolutely elegant. Well, thank you so much. It's hard. I look at this portrait here and I think, ooh, I love this one, and then I compare it to I'm a big McAvoy fan.
Well, I agree. That is lovely. I don't know. I like this one because it's just quite romantic.
It is. It is absolutely.
And she probably wasn't feeling happy at all when it happened. So actually, this is one of my favourite rooms. It's lovely to see it with all the shutters open because typically we use this room much more at night than we do during the day.
Right.
So you come in after dinner. Drinks would be in the Duchess sitting room, then dinner in the dining room, and then after dinner,
you come in
here.
here.
But this is all full of wonderful family portraits.
Yes.
The one over the fireplace is of Caroline, the 4th Duchess. And this is another funny story because I told you I was recently in Newport. So in one of the houses called Rough Point, on the staircase, there's a portrait by Reynolds of her.
Oh my goodness.
And how it's there, I don't know. I don't know. I have to delve a bit further.
Yeah,
see if we can get it back.
Yeah, I was about to say, is there any way you can get it back?
don't know.
And I've seen the other family portrait of her husband, lots of children,
yeah.
and very happy. That was a very happy marriage, wasn't it?
And that was really the first time that Blenheim was lived in as a family home, was the 4th Duke and Duchess. And it was him who employed Capability Brown to put in the lake. So he did a lot.
What this wonderful place.
So anyway, it was sort of the room where you come in and got the bridge table set for playing cards after dinner. Somebody would play the piano. Not usually a member of our family. We're not very musical. So it's just and it's lovely the way it's set up, because you can have your little groups, group there, group there,
Yes.
group there.
And coming in.
Yeah.
And then, of course, the beautiful
and then
Italian garden.
You look south there to Bladen, which is where the family graveyard is.
Okay, right. And that is where Consuelo's
Buried. So this is the bow window room. We now use as a dining room, but actually this is one of the first rooms that the first Duke and Duchess had completed.
Yes.
And she loved this room, I think, largely. Well, obviously you didn't have the Italian gardens then when she was here, but she had it as a bedroom. So I'm assuming the bed would have been opposite the fireplace.
Wonderful.
But it's such a lovely spot. And actually, even as a dining room, if it was just small en famille, we have the small table here. But if it's a big party, we can seat up to about 22 on a long table.
Well, it's just wonderful to be in the private apartments. And that's what's so fascinating about these palaces, these castles. You have the great staterooms, and that's what the public usually wants to see. But then, of course, there are the private apartments, which are...
I know. But, all our bedrooms are up on the second floor. So this is effectively the piano nobile, but all the main bedrooms are upstairs.
Brilliant.
Before I left the private apartments, there was one more treat in store.
This is our famous visitors book. Quite a small one, as you can see.
What's the span of years, roughly?
Well, it ends at about 2005.
Right.
Where does it start?
Oh, gosh.
In the 1860s.
Yes.
Yeah. So it's probably a bit of a diary, this. A bit of a scandalous diary.
That's right.
So this page we're open on now is one Edward and Wallace Simpson.
No.
She was here with her husband, Ernest. And they were here for a big shooting weekend.
No.
And you've also got Winston, Clementine here that weekend. The Baclus.
Oh my relatives, those are Baclus are technically Montagus. They come from the Montagu. But so this would have
Diana
been
Cooper, Duff Cooper. So yeah, it must have been a fun weekend.
Such a fun weekend. And this would have been what, 1936?
Yeah, 36.
Oh yeah, there we go,
Exactly.
36.
Exactly.
And why is it that because he's king, he gets his
Royalties get their own page.
Oh.
And they never write. It's not their surname. It's just
of course,
like Elizabeth
R.
Exactly.
There we are. How? And
Anyway,
she came here with her husband. How extraordinary! Because then 1936, then he abdicated in December 36. Then of course the coronation.
So maybe the deal was sealed. Yeah.
Yes. Well, do you know, if I had more time, Henrietta, I would actually go through this, because I'm always interested to find out.
I mean, it's something I've dipped in and out of it, but I certainly haven't looked through the whole thing. Also, you don't want to handle these things.
No, that's what I'm saying.
There's so much history.
Because there's so much history. But I'm pretty certain, now that I see the Baclus, but I'm pretty certain that if we go far back that way, there would be some sandwiches in there.
Well, if I have time, I'll have a look one day.
Look for the sandwich, exactly. Oh, wow, that is absolutely fascinating.
Blenheim Palace shines in the Oxfordshire landscape, and the collections within are truly breathtaking. Not least the glorious portraits of Consuelo Vanderbilt, who married the 9th Duke of Marlborough in 1895. It's fascinating for me to find out more about the American women who married into the Spencer Churchill family. The American heiress, Jenny Jerome, had married Lord Randolph Churchill in 1874, with their first son, Winston, born at Blenheim.
Now, we all know that Winston was born at Blenheim, but it was an accident. Is that right?
Yes, and he was born in this room. So his parents were here for the weekend for a ball, and the story goes that his mother went on a bumpy carriage ride, and that brought on early labour. So they were notified. The servants came down and cleared off the bed here of all of the coats, because this was the cloakroom.
Right.
And then they called a doctor from Woodstock to come down because her doctor in London couldn't arrive in time.
Of course not.
And yes, he was born here, so a happy accident for us.
A happy accident indeed. Of course, his mother was American, but Jenny, Jerome, and Randolph spent a lot of time here because, of course, his parents were living here.
Yes.
And therefore, Winston then spent a lot of time here.
Yes, and Winston was very close, particularly with his grandmother.
Right.
And he learnt to ride on the estate. He had a wonderful childhood and I think loved staying here, but then frequently came back because of his close relationship with Consuelo later.
Yes, and I always wonder about that relationship between Winston and Consuelo because, of course, Winston had an American mother, and you wonder sometimes if he was really drawn towards Consuelo because he could relate to her.
Yes.
Probably much more than others could.
Absolutely, and I think she was comfortable saying whatever she meant with him, which obviously not everyone did.
Yeah, yes. But wonderful to be here and to be at the spot.
And surrounded by his paintings.
Yes. Can you tell me just a little bit about where he learned to paint?
So he came to painting very late in his life, and he was taught by a mentor, Paul Mars.
Yes, incredible.
And in fact, the story is that he was painting with Paul Mars in the south of France, where he received a telegram saying, war has been declared, you need to come back. And apparently Paul put down his brushes straight away, and Churchill said to him, no, you should probably finish that painting because we might not be able to do one again for a very long time.
Oh my goodness.
And they both finished their paintings and then...
incredible. And then off he went
Yes.
to do his job.
Yes,
yeah.
Absolutely.
The paintings collection at Blenheim is sensational. Kate oversees the conservation of all the collections, which feature throughout the 300 rooms of the palace.
So you, as a keeper of the collection, am I right in saying that you kind of have to balance what gets taken away so that you can repair it, restore it, conserve it, and what stays, because you're constantly having visitors coming through, and that must be a hard juggle.
Yes, it is, because we have to make sure, obviously, the palace looks beautiful for all of those visitors that come. And we need the visitors to be able to maintain and conserve the collection. So it is very much a balancing act.
Right.
It's very much based on the priority of the item. We separate them into groups of tapestries, paintings, carpets, and generally try and work our way through the whole collection. Right. So with the tapestries, we started in 2008. We've done 17 so far. And we've now only got 3 left to conserve. Oh. And then hopefully they'll be safe for another 150 years.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah, it is exciting.
That is so exciting. So where we are right now, the first stateroom, and I'm surrounded by beautiful tapestries, these have been conserved.
This one has.
Right.
And was conserved this year and has only just been rehung. The Surrender of Lille at the back there, that is the one that is programmed to go for next year.
Right. And you can now see, if I'm right, the difference.
Yes, absolutely.
Definitely
the difference in the colours.
Yes.
And also, if you sort of can see behind them, this one is still hung on metal poppers, which is a really bad hanging system and creates a lot of stress for the tapestries. So when we conserve them, we put Velcro on them and then stick them back up on the wall. And it's a much safer hanging system, but it also enables us, if there's a fire, we can get them out quickly.
Absolutely.
And save them.
And save them, and save them. How extraordinary. I can really see the difference because, of course, the colors here, now that it's been conserved,
they're more vibrant.
Yeah, and they're popping.
Yeah.
And it looks, I mean, these two
have been done
because you can look at that rich red.
Yes.
And for each of these tapestries, how long does it normally take? Once they've been removed,
Generally 12 to 14 months.
Yeah.
They're gently washed in a huge bath.
Yes.
Where they basically fill it with water and then gently agitate with a very soft detergent, and then they'll keep draining the bath until the water runs clear, and then you know all of the surface dirt has come out of it.
Right.
And then they'll sort of repair any loose threads, reinforce it, redo the lining, and then they add the Velcro. So you can imagine there are literally millions of bits of wool and silk in each tapestry, so it takes a very long time.
So of course these tapestries always had a story to tell. Can you tell me a little bit about these 4?
So these 4 are part of a set of 10 that was commissioned by the first Duke of Marlborough in 1702, and they were made in Brussels by Duchess de Vos and Lambert de Hont, and they are one of the most accurate representations of the battles at that time. They worked with portraits of the people that were there, they worked with the maps, the topography of the land, so they're considered a really good historical record of each battle.
That is incredible, and I'm just looking around just to take it all in. Speaking of more of the conservation work, when I look around this room, and I'm just, as you said, in one of the approximately 300 rooms in the palace, but there's other bits. You have the pelmets, you have the curtains, you've got the gold leaf everywhere, and this is constantly being looked at because you've got the wear and tear of up to 1 million visitors every single year.
Yes, absolutely. So every year in January, which is our quietest period, we do our deep clean. So each one room is emptied at a time. Really? We take all the furniture to the Great Hall, and that's when we condition check it, photograph it to see if there's any changes from the previous year, and then we also clean each item. And then we clean the room from top to bottom, polish the floors, and then bring it all back in. And that takes about 6 weeks with a team of about 12 people.
Well, I have to say that's really efficient. I was just about to ask you, how long does that take?
Yes, no, we've got a great team.
Yeah.
The succession of staterooms lead to the Long Library, an astonishing 183 feet long and 32 feet high.
Wow.
Blenheim had been gifted to the Duke of Marlborough by Queen Anne in recognition of his victory at the Battle of Blenheim in 1704. John Vanbrugh designed the palace as a celebration of this victory and as a monument to Queen Anne. The architect Nicholas Hawksmoor interpreted Vanbrugh's design for the Long Library as a sequence of 5 interconnected rooms. It's now considered Hawksmoor's finest room at Blenheim. And it's home to the 10,000 books collected by the 9th Duke of Marlborough.
So when you started to conserve the books, what was the conservation sort of process in making sure that they can be preserved for future generations?
So a lot of them, obviously, they're generally mostly leather bound, and the leather had degraded and the spines had weakened from sort of poor handling.
Right.
And there obviously a little bit of environmental damage. That stage also we weren't regularly checking for pests, which is something we check nearly every day now and monitor every area because there's no way to seal the building, so little things get in sometimes and they like to eat. And that's what we don't want. So it was basically making sure that everything was stable, repairing some of the spines. In some cases we just built conservation boxes to then store them in so they could be safely stored back on the shelf, or anything that was really, really fragile, we've moved to the archives to make sure that it's not handled.
And walking down here, this is Hawksmoor all around, is that right?
Yes, it is.
And again,
carving by Isaac Mansfield.
Wow,
yes.
Look at those
and
carvings.
See the blank panels.
Yes.
Unfortunately, that was lovely, Sarah.
Was it? So tell me a little bit about that, because of course, Sarah was very, very instrumental in what we see today, is that right?
Absolutely, this wouldn't be here without her. the first Duke was obviously away,
Yes.
fighting battles, and Sarah managed all of this on her own. I mean, it's a building project that the majority, there would be a huge team managing it now, but
Yes.
she managed it all on her own and watched every penny.
So when you mention here sort of the empty panels,
So they originally were designed to have murals on them, but Sarah decided that Hawksmoor was going to charge a little bit too much for them.
really?
Yes, so she left them blank.
So she left them empty. Oh my goodness. Well, it's still absolutely beautiful, absolutely stunning. And she and the Duke never really, though, properly lived here, is that right?
No, unfortunately not, particularly him, because he was so busy, and then he died in 1722 before the house was actually finished.
Right. But is it right to say that he is buried here now?
Yes.
But he wasn't originally?
He wasn't originally. He was, when he died, he was at Westminster, though his wish had always been to be buried here. So then when Sarah died in 1744, he was moved here to be buried with her, and they're now in the crypt underneath the chapel.
Oh my goodness.
After the first Duke of Marlborough died in 1722, Sarah, his Duchess, worked tirelessly to ensure a fitting monument to a national hero was realized.
It is wonderful to hear how important and what a difference the first Duchess of Marlborough really made at her time here. And of course, building the palace, if you like, but also just making sure that it didn't overspend, because she was a penny pincher, right?
Yes, she was. She managed the budget very, very tightly.
Breathtaking, absolutely breathtaking. Does this chapel still get used?
Only for special family
Right,
occasions.
yes. How wonderful.
Blenheim's chapel has recently been restored and is now gleaming in honor of the first Duke and Duchess of Marlborough.
The conservation work that's been done here,
Yeah.
it was quite a big project, wasn't
It's
it?
a huge project. Traditionally, both doors were always open,
Okay.
and we didn't have a great heating system in here, so it really suffered from a bad environment. And we had paint peeling off the walls, the plaster was failing, there was mould, and so we closed it for nearly 3 years, stripped everything back, conserved all of the wood carving that you can see up there, cleaned it all, and then installed a conservation heating system, but it's not comfort heating, it's fabric heating, so it's just to make sure that the walls essentially and the floor stays warm.
Right.
But at the right level.
Yes.
And then installed the doors to maintain the environment a little more, and then we let it sit for a year just to get used to its new environment.
Right.
And then a long months of discussion and investigation into paint colours and paint
Yes,
work.
yes.
We found 4 different layers underneath the
you
original
did?
paint, yes. So then we decided on this final colour scheme.
And then here we have this monument.
Yes.
And this was commissioned by Sarah, the first Duchess, for her husband.
Yes. She worked with the sculptor, Riseborough, to help him decide the composition, if you like, knowing her personality. She was very particular about what she wanted. And obviously it depicts the first Duke and Duchess. He's dressed as a Roman general, and it's just showing their 2 male sons who are unfortunately passed at this point. The 4 daughters aren't depicted.
Because it correct me if I'm wrong, but it was from the first Duke and Duchess, because the 2 male heirs, if you like, didn't survive. That's where it went down the female line. Is that correct?
Yes, that's when they got an Act of Parliament changed, so it could be inherited, because obviously that was unheard of at that time.
Of course.
So yes, we didn't have a second Duke, we had the second Duchess, Henrietta.
Yes, and that's what's extraordinary, that they were able to get that Act of Parliament.
Yes.
And we're talking, 300 years ago.
And it shows their power and influence
Yes.
as well, that they were able to do that.
Yes,
But
well...
it's quite a monument, isn't
Yes, it certainly is. Well, thank you so much, Kate. This has been an absolute treat. And one of my passions is learning more about conservation, because I think it's so important. So thank you for transferring your wealth of knowledge to me. Wonderful to hear. So thank you so much.
Well, thank you.
Keen to find out more about the initial design of Blenheim, I headed back to the archives.
So here, you've pulled out what for me here?
So here, this is a plan of Woodstock Park with Blenheim House and the gardens. And you can see here, this is his initial plans. And we've got here where the palace is, which he calls Blenheim House at this stage.
Okay.
Which is quite a large house.
Yeah, I can see that. So these are the original Vanbrugh.
Yes.
Incredible.
The purpose of this picture is to put the palace within the context of the larger estate, and also to emphasise the magnificence not only of the building but the parkland and the grounds as well.
Absolutely.
So this one here we've got, which is the general front of the castle.
Absolutely brilliant. And I just love it. Designed by Sir John Vanbrugh.
Yeah.
And again, the general front of Blenheim Castle is most humbly inscribed to His Grace John Duke of Marlborough, Prince of the Holy Empire, Captain General of all His Majesty's forces, and Knight of the most noble order of the Garter. I mean, incredible. Okay, so now...
So this is the south front that looks out onto the south lawn.
Yes.
Towards the gardens.
And there again, it mentions that, yes, we've got castle on one side, and then we have elevation du Château de Blenheim.
Yes.
Oh, but it's just so wonderful to have these. Am I right in saying that Sarah was really very involved involved in the works that went on here for a very long period?
So there would be correspondence between Vanbrugh and the first Duke while he was overseas, giving him updates of the work that was going on, what alterations were going to be made, whether they should be made, trying to get his approval. But Sarah was more on the ground, working and overseeing, and she took her role very seriously as taking responsibility for the army of workers here while her husband was with the army.
And I guess that would be quite unique, though, having a woman, you know, back in the sort of early 1700s in charge of all of these men.
Yeah.
And did that go down well?
Well, Sarah Churchill was a very formidable woman. I think quite a fantastic character, but not everybody shared that view, which meant that there were fallouts with the workers when there were problems with payments not being received.
She also... It fell out with Vanbrugh, is that right? And that was the end of that relationship.
Yes.
So he never saw Blenheim, I'll call it Palace now, Blenheim Palace completed. Really, I mean, he didn't see it to the end because he was
see the
kicked
project
off.
to the end. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, so he resigned in 1716, but there were buildings still going on in the palace until the early 1730s.
Right. After the Duke had died.
After the Duke had died.
So Hawksmoor then really did see it to the finish line.
Yeah, he was there to make sure that things were completed within
look at
the early
this
timescale.
So these are original Hawksmoor designs, drawings, if you like.
This is ink.
Yes.
Yeah.
So fantastic.
So it's amazing that it survived, and you can see the quality and the detail. It's not faded as much as you would expect modern ink to do. And then this one here.
Look at this.
This one's particularly interesting because at the top it has Sarah's handwriting on it, and she writes that this is the plan for Mr. Vanbragh's way of finishing the bow window room, and I desire you to mind how much higher the cornice of the window comes from the wainscot of the room. So she was concerned about the wainscoting, which is the decorative wooden panelling.
Yes.
That protects the wall from scuff. So she was very clear with Hawksmoor this is how I want it done.
The reason that we're here today at Blenheim is because, in one sense, of Queen Anne. Mm-hmm. And of course, there was that relationship, then they fell out, but they were really close. Do you have any documentation between Queen Anne and Sarah?
Well, what we do have here is an account book when Sarah was privy, keeper of the privy purse for Queen Anne. So she was responsible for Anne's personal expenditure.
Okay.
And what's exciting about this book in particular is it demonstrates how Sarah was committed to accounting in a way that perhaps was unusual for her time and arguably the first to have done this at court. So she details every single payment, and when things were delivered they had to be signed for, and as you have a look through here,
oh my goodness,
you can see we've got money here to Mr. Gilead for making an anthem on Thanksgiving Day for the first Duke.
Oh my goodness, this is fantastic. So these, so that I understand, these are basically detailed accounts of what the crown was putting out.
Mm-hmm. So it's Queen Anne's personal money, so to speak.
I see.
As opposed to what the crown as a whole.
Okay.
So there isn't reference here to Blenheim Palace Build, for example.
Right.
But there's evidence of jewellery being bought, and there's money here paid to take a man out of prison.
Oh gosh, I could look at this all day long.
Series of pensions. But as we go further through, we've got Sarah's writing here, where she's justifying the money that she was paid, or if there were additional kind of expenses, she goes into detail. But one of the things that she did ask the Queen to do, which was unusual for the time, is actually sign the accounts. Oh. So Queen Anne signs on February the 1st that I've examined these accounts and she's agreed to pay them, that they are actually correct, so that there's no discrepancy. Oh, nobody can be accused of sort of swindling her. And then, yes, that's Queen Anne's signature.
Anne R. Is that right?
Yeah.
Look at that.
Yeah. Fantastic, isn't it?
Listen, I've seen sort of, the signatures of Queen Elizabeth I. I've seen Queen Victoria, but I've never seen Queen Anne until today. That is brilliant. Thank you, Alexa. This has been an absolute treat.
The original gardens at Blenheim were designed at the same time as the palace itself. But each generation has added and adapted them to suit the fashions of their age. I met up with Andy Mills, head gardener at Blenheim, to hear how the gardens have evolved and how they are being given new life.
Is that Andy?
It is. Hello.
I was told to find somebody really tall with a beard and colorful socks.
That'll be me.
That's you.
Me.
Hi.
Hi, how you doing?
Good, how are you? I'm
good,
Julie.
I'm good. Do you want to come in?
Are you sure?
Yeah, mind your step though.
Oh, that's so exciting. Okay. The yoga comes in handy.
Indeed.
Anyway, so nice to meet you.
Nice to see you.
This is brilliant. So you're head gardener, is that right?
I am. I've only been here 12 months.
Yeah. So what are you doing here? And tell me a little bit about...
Well, I'm just weeding
where we are.
Around the fountain. This is the original design for the Piazza Navona fountain, the fountain of the Four Rivers in Rome.
Right.
And this was the one that was made for the Pope in order to make him have the bigger one, as it were.
Right.
So this is the model, this is the prototype.
Okay,
and we believe this was given to the first Duke of Marlborough. So.
Fountain, this is spectacular. And will this fill with water?
Yeah, this will be about yay deep.
Okay.
But at the moment we're just cleaning the ponds out. So we've pumped them dry, we can wash them, clean them, get all the muck out, get the coins out that mark the bottom and that sort of thing. And then we can look at a bit of repair, a bit of weeding, and then we can start restoring it. But this fountain's ripe for restoration. There's so many bits on it that have come off over the years that we've got to put back.
That you have to put back. And so this is the time that you're able to look at it, assess it, and try to do as much repair as you can.
At the moment, we're very much assessing what we're going to do with it and working it out. I mean, there's a lot of loose bits.
Okay.
So we need to work out and get them back and put it right. And then the statues themselves, the river gods, really, we're losing the sort of definition of them. We're losing of what they should represent. You know, you've got the 4 major rivers there.
Yes, no, of course.
You should see them.
The water terraces are stunning and are a centerpiece of the 9th Duke of Marlborough's legacy to Blenheim. And Gladys, the 9th Duke's second American Duchess, has also left her mark.
As I'm peering over here, this is one of the reasons I wanted to find you is these sphinxes with,
Absolutely
should we go have a look at them?
Indeed.
So this is extraordinary that Gladys wanted to create this. They're kind of iconic. And I think for many people, you come to Blenheim, you know the story of Consuelo Vanderbilt, but then it's learning that, hey, wait, there was another American who was also the 9th Duchess of Marlborough, and here she is.
Indeed.
Forever immortalized.
In many ways, more so than Consuelo.
Yeah.
Although Consuelo's money is what saved Blenheim.
Yes.
Simple as that, whereas Gladys saved parts of the garden. So the two of them did quite some good work.
Yes, and of course they were friends, and which is rather extraordinary. Oh my goodness.
It's phenomenal.
It's beautiful. Absolutely beautiful. So this is really the first terrace, if you like.
It is. I mean, if you think as a guest of the Duke, you'd come out of the house and alight onto this terrace. And this is your first, but you probably would have viewed it from one of the bedrooms.
Yes, of course. And so, Andy, you're head gardener, and how many gardeners are on your team?
There are 14 of us
on
the team.
Correct me if I'm wrong, but the size of these gardens compared to how many gardeners there were 100 years ago, it's relatively small, isn't it?
It is, but mechanisation has come in. You know, we've not long cut all the hedges in the water terrace, so you're catching them just at the sort of crispest. So we've changed the time we cut because of the seasons have changed.
Yes.
But you know, it would have all been done with shears, hand shears.
That's right.
Whereas I can send 2 chaps in here with battery pack hedge cutters, and they whip through.
Right.
And this sort of parterre here and all formal hedges, this took the best part of a week for 2 people. Now, in the past, that's taken like 6 weeks.
People, you know, that's what's so wonderful about these historic houses. They're not just coming to see the house. The UK is known for their gardens, and you're always finding formal gardens, less formal gardens, but some type of gardens always around these historic houses because they were important.
Yeah, I mean, it was a way of showing your wealth and your education.
Yes.
You know, you 18th century, what have you, you'd done the grand tour, you'd come back, you wanted to create an English landscape garden in the wild style and that sort of thing. So that was very much Blenheim's fore, you know, early 1700s right through to about 1760. Capability Brown comes along and goes, actually, sweep all that away.
Right.
Let's bring the parkland up to the house. Let's have the cattle up to the house, and very natural.
Yes.
So and then you know, say the 9th Duke comes along, very different style, later style French, very classical. You know, so he's put his mark on it.
Yes.
And this is what we're left with, this legacy, which is phenomenal.
Wow. So there's your team right there.
That's some of them, that's some of them working away.
Spectacular.
It is.
So this is the Italian gardens, but where am I standing?
You're standing on what we call the Duchess's steps, which I believe behind us is the Duchess's sitting room.
Right.
And that, you know, I like to think she would have come out here and enjoyed the view, maybe taken tea out here, and just enjoyed this spectacle.
Who decided to erect this, if you like?
Well, this is the 9th Duke.
Okay. Again.
And he instructed Achille de Chêne, the same gentleman that did the water terraces,
yes,
to create this in here. And once again, it's that sort of nice swirls and patterns and what have you, and leads the eye beautifully.
Yes.
And it is the Duke's private garden still.
Right.
So we have weddings in the orangery, and they can use the Italian garden for photos and what have you. But mainly it's just for the family, this part of the garden.
It's just for the family.
The 9th Duke and his first wife, I believe, did a 6-month tour of Europe as part of their honeymoon.
Yes.
So they would have seen these gardens in France. They would have seen the work of Achille de Chêne, and he was the garden designer of the time. And
right.
He was the man you wanted to do your garden. He was, you know, and he was doing this sort of thing all over the place. And there aren't many of these left. So actually, this is very, very special.
Yes.
Seeing the work happening on the orangery, I couldn't help but take a peek inside. I met up with Heather Carter, managing director at Blenheim, to hear about this extensive restoration project.
Oh my goodness. Oh, Heather, it's so inviting and warm, and I love the color scheme.
Yes, I mean the whole theme was about bringing the outside in. So
yes,
so it was once the greenhouse. So you know, a bit of greenery and the leaves on the chandeliers, and bringing a more contemporary style to it, because it was very sedate and it had the glass roof before. It hadn't been. Nothing's happened to it for years.
Right.
It was used as a greenhouse. It was used by the 4th Duke as where he had his family plays in here, go back a couple of hundred years. The 10th Duke's son had his railway set in here.
Oh.
And then in the 90s, we opened it up as a banqueting space.
Right, so the 90s was the first time that sort of, if you like, a renovation happened.
Yes.
And then it needed to be updated.
And nothing had happened since then.
Right.
Nothing had happened.
Yeah. This is a huge project, and to raise the funds for this must have been a mammoth leap in saying, hey, we need to do something about this.
So we created the Heritage Foundation probably about 6-7 years ago now, where the monies that is raised through the visitor business goes straight back into the charity, which is for restoration projects. And we committed at that time to do £40 million in 10 years, and we're just over 5 years over that, so we're past halfway. So we've dredged the lake, we've done a lot of repairs on windows and stonework in the palace. This was, a £2.5 million project to repair the roof, replace the roof in the end. So it was amazing to be able to do that, because we've had years and years and years of a leaky roof. So it was just fabulous to be able to get this project done.
Yeah, and a mammoth task.
Yeah,
I mean, it's stunning, absolutely beautiful. So this now is an event space. Is that lots of things?
So believe it or not, we have an event in here tomorrow. So you can see everybody, you can't see them, but they're all panicking behind the scenes.
Right.
And then we open as a restaurant for afternoon teas and lunches. We've got lots of people booked for Sunday lunch this weekend.
Oh my gosh.
It's a really important income generator for the business. So we need to get it operating very quickly.
Right.
But then, in the quieter months, January, February, March, we might have some filming in here. So again, filming is a really, really important income for us, and we try and create spaces that might be usable. So this is almost a blank canvas. It can be disguised into anything.
Of course. It is magnificent. So thank you, and well done. This is so exciting, and I'm definitely going to come back. I'm the American, I love a good afternoon tea. So I'm coming back for having Thank you so much, Heather.
I will definitely be returning to Blenheim for that afternoon tea in the orangery, and to explore more of the fascinating history of the palace and estate. Thank you so much for joining me, and I look forward to your company very soon for another historic house visit.